Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our mission is to engage, inspire, and empower the global community of risk practitioners. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal. And guys, I think you are in for a treat today because I have Hannah Walter here today with me, and we're going to talk about human factors. Hannah has many years of experience in this field, both in the industry and academia. And she has also been involved in doing some research and implementation in the virtual reality world. So I can't wait to talk about this topic with Hannah. With that, how are you doing today, Hannah? Welcome to the show.
Well, good morning. I'm doing okay here in sunny Minnesota. Excited for the topics.
Okay. Wonderful. So Hannah, I know you have an advanced degree in this field, and also you spend fair amount of time in academia, and then you transition into the industry. So walk us through that journey a little bit. What was that transition like for you?
Sure. At the University of Minnesota, I got my PhD in human movement science, which is a combination of psychology with anthropometrics, ergonomics, that sort of thing. And I combined it with a minor of human factors. My goal for a long time was to be a professor, to shape the next generation and really drive people towards their passions. But I ended up making the switch to industry. I had an individual with the same background as me reach out and say, hey, I think you would be a good fit. I decided to make the jump, and it has been an interesting transition. But I think changing from academia to industry has given me such a diverse view on people in general, but also myself as a professional and how I define myself and self-reflect on, I have the academic version of Hannah. I have the industry version of Hannah, individual version of Hannah, of course.
Right. But I guess looks like you learned very early on the power of networking.
Yes. I actually got my bachelor's degree in Ohio, and my mentor at that point said, I think you should consider going up to Minnesota and getting a PhD with my mentor. So my PhD mentor is my academic grandfather, as we lovingly say. And so I learned very quickly on that sometimes a wise piece of advice but from someone you trust is more valuable than just about anything else. Really trust the people. It hasn't steered me wrong yet.
That's great. All right, Hannah. So let's dive into our topic today, which is about human factors. And I know this is a very important topic for medical devices, and I feel it gets sometimes often overlooked. And as we move into this virtual space, I believe human factors will become even more important. First, walk us through this evolution of technology that is happening all around us. Especially in the virtual space, a lot of work going on there, right? What's happening in the robotic surgery space, for example, or AR, VR? Tell us a little bit about the latest.
Sure. We are seeing a massive boom in user experience. It feels like a field that has been more recently discovered as we see things like apps on phones generating lots of money, simply if they're easy to use. Traditional human factors is a combination of physical hardware and your software or your graphic user interface. The recent years, as we see the importance of the digital space emerge, there's been a much higher demand for user experience, also known as UX, and human factors engineers to support that field. When we see things like robotics is a very complex system that requires a lot of time on the surgeon. And so understanding how we can make that process easier on the surgeon, both physically and in terms of like software interactions, it has become really critical in ensuring that the device is not only comfortable to use, but also safe to use.
Yeah. And, if I imagine that scenario, I have not personally seen it, but would love to someday. But I imagine instead of looking at the patient directly now, the surgeon has to look into a box or maybe on a screen and then manipulate the surgical robotic arm and with their hands. And it's like they're losing the direct touch with the patient. And that to me sounds like would create a lot of challenges from a human factors and safety perspective, right?
It does. It creates a lot of challenges. The interface, the physical interface, oftentimes they're like controllers, like joystick controllers. To drive the robotic arms. And a lot of what we see is a struggle of the individual to learn the capabilities of the machine and how they can try and transfer their knowledge of how they would do it to match the capabilities of the machine. And I'm sure you've been there where you thought, oh, I can open a box this way. And you just
Yeah.
box open.
That's right.
Lots of situations like that, and we don't want the box to be a patient. So
Yes.
there are small misunderstandings that can lead to large outcomes. And it is important that every single interaction on such a complex device is taken into consideration.
Yeah, you need some deep insights into how humans will interact. Now, one thing that fascinated me about your background is a project you did called Task-Specific Behavioral Adoption in a Virtual Environment. I immediately started thinking about these AR, VR headsets that I heard about this medical devices. They are being introduced in the OR. I had Phil Deming on the show from MediView a few months ago, and we talked about it. So I can imagine in that environment, the user interface would be even more critical because you are now asking them to operate in a sort of virtual real. I don't know. It's it's kind of combined virtual real environment, right? Very, very interesting. Tell us a little bit more about what that is like.
So it is augmented reality, being able to see. Now, I know the Medtronic Hugo Raz uses kind of 3D goggles to simulate the depth of field, to try and make it easier for you to see the anatomy and fully process what you're looking at. In the past, even 10 years ago, things like the Oculus Rift were making their way to the common market. And what was interesting to me during that time period is that we now had a mass market producing data that is now being used in our medical devices. We have a deeper understanding of how people tolerate these virtual environments simply from user data on what are essentially toys.
Yeah.
I have one myself, the new Oculus Meta integrated headset. And a lot of the data that we understand from these devices is not just use, but also a very interesting topic, which is motion sickness.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. I think that's something you learn in your project, right? You learn how people adapt to these environments.
Yeah, it is there's a lot of theory behind how people interact and adapt to their environments. The theory that I tend to use is the ecological theory of perception and action, which is humans are able to look at their environment and without cognitive processing, they're able to sort of eyeball things and make decisions on how to move forward. That can be very difficult if what they're seeing isn't real. What information they're trying to process to inform their movements isn't mapping sort of to what their physicality is telling them. There's a lot of different theories about what this is called. The general term I like to use is affordances. But what we do know is that in these virtual environments, women become motion sick more frequently than men do. And that has been a topic of wide discussion in terms of how do we design devices that are accommodating to all our individuals, all of our users. We certainly can't make robotic surgery devices that only accommodate male surgeons.
Interesting. So, this is such a fascinating point that you just made. I don't want to dig deeper into the theory behind why that is the case, but if that is the case, how do you think we can bring this into the conversation very early on when we are designing and developing a product that will require our user to operate in an environment like that? How best to go about doing that?
I think the best way to go about that, and this is me as an academic, is just to say, oh, let's do a literature search. Let's just buckle down and do literature. But I actually think the best way to go about this is to partner with universities that are doing research with these devices. I believe there's several universities that do have robotic surgery assisted devices, and being able to partner with them to drive research to better understand that. Oftentimes in the industry world, our research is really, really restricted by the product development process. We're here to make money. We got to get things out onto the field. It's a different ballgame for the universities. And much like getting data from the mass-produced Oculus Rift, which has been phenomenal, I think we are able to pair with universities and try to drive these projects. I think they have a lot of academic interest and validity that has long-term outcomes.
So let's talk about specifically the difference that you mentioned between how male users would respond versus female users. But before we go into that, guys, if you're just joining now, my guest today is Hannah Walter, and we are talking about human factors and how we have to start thinking about them early on in product development, looking at our human interactions with our very sophisticated and technologically advanced devices like robotic surgeries or surgical devices and AR, VR headsets, so much going on. And human machine interface has become even more important. So please keep your questions, comments, thoughts coming in the chat. This is a conversation, not a lecture or a webinar. And I invite you to share your own challenges and best practices you have learned. So Hannah, let's continue. I want to probe particularly the point you made that female users might respond and react very differently because of this motion sickness issue versus male users. How would we be even bring that topic for conversation in our environment where, let's face it, our product development environment is male dominated, in my opinion, in the industry. And you as a female practitioner, share with us your personal journey, what you experienced and how you would want this to come up in the conversation.
Well, I think one of the best motivators is failure. I think people are very failure adverse. So having a good example of how a lack of inclusivity has caused issues is usually the best way to bring it up. There is a device that I am aware of. I'm not saying what device, but the fun part about this device is I have talked to my nurses, my lab technicians, individuals in the field that I have a personal relationship with. As a human factors engineer, there's nothing I value more than my user groups. And I do try to make strides to make really solid connections so that they don't feel so much like participants as much as they do my own coworkers. But during my explorations, I open my doors and I want to hear about what complaints folks actively in the field have. I think that open door policy, one, leads to innovation because it allows me to get boots on the ground running insights. And one of these insights is there is a medical device that cannot be used in several hospitals because the device has not been made colorblind friendly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is a device with a lot of disposables, produces a lot of money for that in that hospital. And as hospitals are becoming more inclusive, as they're realizing the limitations of the folks using the devices, for the sake of liability, if you are a colorblind individual, you are not allowed to use that device. Mm-hmm. Now, 10% of my male population has some form of colorblindness. So if I have 15 lab techs and 10 of them are males, one of them is going to be colorblind. And now we have a liability. Now, you can ban that lab tech from using that device. But if that's your lead lab tech, you have really knocked the supports out from yourself by buying a device that can't be used. Your hospital policies won't allow. Small details of inclusivity, such as color blindness, which is overlooked. I constantly see medical devices where they have stop red and go green next to each other. Red-green color blindness is the most common, by the way. So to my colorblind individual, it's just a single colored bar. Mm-hmm. It happens constantly. It's not designed for. And those small details will prevent a sale from happening in the hospital.
That's a wonderful example because, all the KPI dashboards, even the risk acceptability matrices that we see are color-coded like that. What a brilliant point to raise, Hannah. Now, you mentioned that, just emphasizing and highlighting these key subtle points and relating it to the user base is important. And I think that people don't intentionally or deliberately miss this. They're just not aware. And perhaps when we bring this into the conversation, we recognize that it could be because of simple lack of awareness that we can have a more fruitful conversation about this. And this basically supports our desire and theory that we have talked about, that these conversations should happen early in the development process, not farther down the road. Right?
Absolutely. The number one reason projects don't make it through the FDA is due to human factors complaints. It is an issue that hounds the medical device market. It is not always avoidable. You can't figure out every single issue that's going to happen. That is just part of designing products. It's just part of life. But having early conversations and really exploring relationships, professional relationships, but relationships nonetheless, and open door policies with nurse practitioners, hospitals, and having an open line of, if you have a question or you have a complaint, please pass it along. I do see oftentimes that gets passed along to sales reps, but their job is to evaluate if this is an issue that they need to pull a product from the field. It doesn't always get to the engineers.
Yeah. Okay. So Bijan is asking a question here, which is an interesting question. Since red-green color blindness is the most common, and these two colors are globally used for go, no go, even on traffic lights, right? How do colorblind people handle their daily life to be safe? Do you have any insights on that? How do people adjust to it? And I think that was part of your thinking around or finding around adaptation, right? How do people adapt to this?
Well, the good thing with the colored lights is you can still see the light behind that lens. You can still see it. There is a lot of frustration. Luckily, most people are not dealing with a red-green situation besides the traffic lights in their day-to-day. If you are lucky, that red-green will have a white line between the two sections and additional iconography that shows stop, don't stop. And I do feel that nowadays, most green sections will have like a check mark. And most red sections will have like an X or a stop sign. So that additional iconography is a really solid decision. But what you'll find is that these individuals who are colorblind, they do adapt. They find ways to get around it. As a painter who runs a painting group of 40 people every Monday, occasionally I will discover somebody who does not know that they are colorblind. And they will bring me a painting, ask for critique, and their red and their green paints are smeared together. They don't realize they're different colors. So sometimes in our common world, red-green is not that big of a deal. It does not hinder their interactions. You know, most people are not responsible for the life of a patient to where it's a concern.
But you also mentioned a couple of important points there is that we have introduced additional kind of design solutions there, the checkbox, the line, the light. It's not just static red-green. I think over time, people have incorporated this experience into better solutions, right? Did I hear that correct?
Yes, we do see basic design elements have grown. We see things like iconography that have become very standard across industries and just in standard development. Doesn't mean it always happens, but for the most part, people with red-green color blindness can go through their life without really struggling. I highlighted the painting example because that is one of the few instances where we do need to get another person involved to check their paint for them and be like, nope, that's green. You don't get to use that. And that's, part of a community. But overall, we do see designs evolve and accommodate. I would like to see that for our female populations in the medical community. And that will only happen, though, if we have people on the inside who are driving those thoughtful changes.
But here's a key point, though. The key point here is that if you start talking about this early on, perhaps your engineering team can come up with some design solutions to account for that and not be blindsided in the post-market phase, right? So this is a very concrete example of how human factors related conversations early in the development can drive better design solutions. So I want to loop back on the motion sickness aspect of it. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Knowing what you know now, if we are designing a headset, an AR, VR headset, how would we go about having that conversation in the requirements gathering phase? Do you have any insights on that?
Wow, that's a very, very complex topic. I think you could go about looking at what things tend to trigger motion sickness the most. Generally having a headset on and then walking with the headset or doing major movements increases the chances. So a requirement where the individual can wear the headset but is seated or positioned in a way where they're not doing a lot of body movements would definitely reduce that. But in terms of how do you define a user need, that can be very, very complex. And I'm not for sure if I have enough experience to talk fully on that topic. But
no worries.
Yeah, going deeper into understanding the literature. But I really think communicating with your team early on, the expectations, even if you're in a very fast product development process, that, hey, there's a user group that we kind of need to consider.
Yeah, and we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait until the prototype is far advanced to do that testing. We can find a lot of users around us to do that testing, right?
Absolutely. And it's, the big thing is you don't need to be, this device is for surgeons, sure. But there are lots of individuals who are female in the medical community that understand the anatomy, who can be, tapped in as participants to help run the device. There are lots of ways to go about testing to be more inclusive. That won't break the bank because you're paying to have 15 surgeons fly in who are specifically female from across the world. You can be economical in this decision.
Yeah. I think the key point here is that this kind of a nuanced conversation early on in the development process can really help us explore the solution space in a little bit more robust way. Vijan has another question here. Are there standards or guidances that capture the latest wisdoms in human-friendly design? Can you speak to that?
That is a large wheel that turns slowly. We do have occasional updates in our human factors guidance. However, a lot of the guidance is made vague on purpose, and that puts the responsibility on the company. General guidance is you need to be able to test it, make sure your users can use it, and they can use it safely. How it's defined from there is really on the company, and that can be for good or bad. I view it as a fantastic way to drive innovation by pushing companies to come up with those solutions. I think you're giving companies the opportunity to come up with fantastically innovative solutions in the market that can set them apart.
And it doesn't have to be a guidance officially issued by a regulatory authority, right? What about academia? What about research papers, literature? I'm sure there's a lot of research being done and published, and maybe you can help us think about some of those. Maybe you can point to some of those resources.
In terms of academic research, the main guidance is, focused around protecting your participants, but how the research itself is conducted can vary so much. My own research varied from being in a lab with a virtual reality device all the way out to spending a month on a ship out in the Pacific Ocean, through the Bahamas, and up into Boston. I spent a month on a ship studying participants, mariners, and how they moved.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was.
I think I'm going to have another conversation with you about that. I'm just so fascinated. Such a great experience. But please go ahead.
It was a fantastic experience, and I did it multiple times. But, when in terms of how you conduct your research, the main thing is protecting your participants. And from there, it's free game. The big thing about the academic world, though, is academics are highly critical of each other. So if you are bold enough to put something out as a published paper, you better be ready for people to disagree with you and ask you to explain and to fight. And that is part of the glory of being an academic, is it really sharpens your skills in terms of, reading.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing because that allows the ideas to be fully debated and aligned and, consensus to emerge. And that's okay. That's a great process. Sometimes I wish it happened in the industry a little bit more often where, we have a get in the line kind of a culture in many places. We wouldn't go there too much. But Hannah, I think we are running very close to our 30 minutes here. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just collect your thoughts and maybe share with us 2 or 3 key takeaways at the end of our presentation today. Guys, in the meantime, I'll share with you a few announcements. Next week, we will not meet. I have to take my kids to college, bring them up, get them moved in. So we will not meet next week. But the week after that, we will have another fascinating conversation with Ed Ball around what's happening in the regulatory world in the EU. He is sharing some insights from the RAPS Euro Convergence Conference. So please show up. The announcement will go out very soon on LinkedIn. The second announcement is I'm so excited to share with you that I have just launched a multi-part series on medical device recalls, a deep dive on medical device recalls in a series of articles on my Let's Talk Risk newsletter. This is a deep dive which is focusing on recalls in a holistic way, but also digging deeper into device-specific recalls. And we are trying to find if there are signals in the adverse events data that preceded these recalls, all public data. And we are doing a lot of deep analysis on tens of thousands of adverse events that have been reported associated with some of these devices. The intent here is to learn a methodology that can help us identify these signals early in the post-market process. So if you guys are interested in that, please reach out to me and I'll share with you the links to those articles. 3 of them have gone out. The next one in the series will go out next week. I've been personally so excited about this because this has allowed me to really learn a lot about early signals. And trust me, we have a lot of data in our industry. It's not like we don't have data. We have a lot of data. We just don't have good methods to explore that data and probe that data in a way that helps us get these signals early. So I really hope you will enjoy it. But if you're interested, let me know and I'll share that detail with you. Hannah, with that, the floor is yours. Please share just 2 or 3 key takeaway points with us.
Sure. I would say probably my most important takeaway is you need to talk to the people you are building the device for. That always seems like a given, But there have been many projects where assumptions have been made about what kind of device we're making and who we are making it for. And we have done similar things, and therefore it's okay. And making those assumptions can be great for moving a product along. But we live in an ever-changing world. COVID has changed the way my nurses approach tasks. Our populations are aging and changing. And it is so, so, so important that we have open communication with our professionals, our user groups, so that we can really drive innovation so that our products hit the mark when they're released.
And that's the human side of it, right? So let's not forget the human in the human factor. So I love it. Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us today. Guys, thank you for showing up again. I love it. Week after week, we are having these great conversations. I will say that you are part of this journey. So please reach out to me if you have any feedback, any suggestions. If you want to be on the show, it takes no preparation. Please just raise your hand and let me know, and we will schedule something. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you once again in a week from now.